Hi, everyone. So, in this class, we're going to be talking a little bit about the two readings. I wanted to sort of highlight a couple of issues that I think are important that will help you guide your own exploration of these texts. So, I actually have these here in the opposite order that they're posted online. I realized for this, I wanted to talk a little bit uh, about Shoshana Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, that we're reading a chapter from first, and then move on to the Kate Crawford reading. Okay, so the key things that Zuboff is talking about in this particular excerpt, and this is actually from a much longer book and one that is pretty depressing to read. But her point in this chapter has to do with the fact that when we're online, we are doing particular things from our point of view. Okay, so let's say we are searching for a pair of shoes to buy. Our goal is to buy a pair of shoes. Okay, or let's say we're posting a picture of us with our friends on Instagram. Our goal in that is sharing a picture with our friends. Okay, so we have a point of view on what these technologies are doing. And we are giving these platforms certain inputs to make them do the things that we want to do, like search for shoes or post a picture. But what happens on the other side? What happens on the side of the platform is that all of those keystrokes, right? All of those choices that we're making are going to a location. And what is happening to them there is they're actually being processed and aggregated with many, many, many other data points, right? So our clicks get harvested and put together with other people's clicks, and all together, that data set is scanned and monitored for behavioral patterns. Okay, so what's happening is that something that is actually sort of an artifact, like a byproduct, almost really a waste product of the interaction from our point of view, is actually, by being aggregated with so many other data points, turned into a huge data set that shows what users are doing. And this has become something that not only the tech company who collects it can use, but they also sell this. They sell this to other companies. And what's not really clear, right? If you look at, for example, privacy policies, she has a long discussion of how hard it is to understand privacy policies, but we're not really generally aware that all of this information is being harvested from us all the time. So when Zuboff talks about rendition from experience to data, that's the chapter title. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what she means by those words. So what she's saying is something that for us is an experience, something that is something we are doing as part of our day. Like, let's say, searching for a recipe for a smoothie, or like I said, trying to find a pair of shoes, right? Even the random things that we click on, right? All of that we think of as just us living our lives and doing what we want to do. But that is actually being rendered. It's being turned into data that, once it's aggregated with everybody else's, turns out to be incredibly valuable. It turns out to have a sort of significant dollar value in that format. So rendition is the word that she is sort of coining to talk about that transformation from something that we think of as sort of incidental or minor aspect of our experience, right? So clicking here, clicking there, doing this, doing that online, that's actually becoming transformed into a product. And not only a usable product, but a very valuable product. And as a result, and this is point 2, it has become so valuable that now you have a situation where corporations who are harvesting all of this information and turning it into data want to claim that there's a right to do that they have an inherent right to essentially monitor our behavior and collect data on it. And her point is that we've never consented to that, right? We haven't implicitly consented to that, for example, by using Google search. But in fact, that is what is happening. So she talks a great deal about Google, and I thought it might be helpful to sort of revisit that mission statement that we talked about last week, the new mission statement that replaced the longer sort of discussion that included that phrase, "Don't be evil." And I just want to point out that if you look at the mission statement, there's really nothing that would make you think that you are the information on Google, right? But in fact, that is what Zuboff is saying, is that we all become the information. And that while we think that information is accessible and useful for us, what is actually happening is that we are being turned into information that is accessible to those who pay to use it. So this is just sort of a draft, but this is my attempt to rewrite the Google mission statement in light of what Zuboff is talking about. So if you think about replacing the words this way, I think this is sort of the gist of what Zuboff is talking about in this chapter. So Google's mission is to collect the world's behavior, right? To sort of harvest these clicks and these patterns of use and behavior that are generated as we interact with the platform, and use these to predict our future behavior and thereby to control it, right? Because all of that information about how we behave online can be used, in fact, to sort of predict what will we click on next? What are we interested in? What will we do, right? So we're very familiar, obviously, with being served targeted ads. And I don't know if you have had this uncanny experience. We just had it this week where we were having a family discussion about a very specific topic. And then suddenly my daughter started getting served information and products related to that topic. And I don't think that it was actually a question of our phones listening to us, although many believe that that's true. I think it was a result of a search. Then if you're searching for that, you must be interested in that. So I think that, this is absolutely a reality now of our lives online, that this information, which we're not terribly aware of generating it, right? From our point of view, it's really a byproduct. But it is actually has become Google's most valuable product, is this massive data set, which has so many points in it, right? That large scale patterns of behavior actually start to become available. And once you see those large scale patterns, you can use those, you can turn around and use those to shape future behavior. And so she's painting a pretty chilling portrait, I think, of the lack of awareness on our part that all of this is happening, and the fact that we are, in fact, becoming the product of these platforms that we think are serving us. And she goes on to talk about the, the sort of rising market for smart devices in all kinds of home appliances, for example, or wearable technology, for example, and says that these two, right, are interested, have become aware that the information that they're collecting can be sold, right? Can become itself a product. So we think of, for example, a Roomba. I think of it, at least, as a device that I would be interested in having to. I have dogs and I've got dust bunnies everywhere. This would be so helpful, right, in cleaning up the dust bunnies. So my perception of this product is that it's cleaning my floors. But the company, iRobot, that makes this actually is realizing that this can be a data collection device. So as Zuboff talks about how there is a plan to collect information about floor plans. And this could be used as a large data set that could be sold to, for example, like realtors or developers, right? It's information about configurations of people's apartments or living spaces. So it is actually collecting information about your private environment and aggregating that with a lot of other information to become a saleable product. Okay, so that doesn't sound, I think, too frightening, right? Because I don't really think of the floor plan of my dwelling. I mean, I feel like it's a little bit creepy, but it doesn't feel terribly invasive to me. But if you think about some of the other products, and this is very true of personal medical technology and also of fitness trackers. I'm going to talk about Sleep Number because this is something that she mentions. If you look at, for example, the Sleep Number website, and I thought we could just take a look at this here. What is being sold to me on this website is a bed, right? And it's telling me I'm going to sleep better in this bed. Okay? That's the message I'm taking away as a consumer about this. So what are some of the things that this bed offers? By being a smart bed, we don't have to let's say you're sleeping with a partner, you don't have to argue over how firm the mattress is, etc. You could have different sides of the bed. It's going to sense your movements and adjust to help keep you asleep. It's going to monitor your sleep. It's going to help you fall asleep. If your partner snores, it's going to help. Okay. So these are all of the things that I'm learning on this website about what Sleep Number is doing. But in fact, what is actually going to be happening on the Sleep Number bed is that all of this data about my body and how it sleeps, when it sleeps, in what position it sleeps, at what temperature it is, right? All of that is actually going to be turned into information that can be sold. And notice there's really nothing on here. And I really doubt that if we drill deeper into this website, and if anybody wants to do it, by all means, tell us what you find out. But I have a feeling it's not going to mention that any of that behavioral data collection about sleep, right? So if we look at what you should know about the science of sleep and health, this is going to be talking about, these kinds of issues that you can see on the screen here. Mm-hmm. It's not talking about how this bed actually is a data collection device that is harvesting biometric information about the bodies that are inside the bed. That I think is really, really bizarre and strange. And it is absolutely part of the economic model of these companies, right? She points out that when the Roomba she points out that when the Roomba released its plans to collect data through the Roomba, that their stock price tripled. So it is absolutely, some people are aware of what's happening with these devices, but it is investors, not consumers, who are clear on what this device actually does. And this is not how these devices are presented, as you can see from the example of the Sleep Number. She talks for a long time about privacy policies, and I think this is really worth reading. She makes several points about them. But one is that there's no meaningful way to opt out of this. If you opt out of the data collection, you also opt out of all of the other features. So you're essentially left with something that doesn't deliver most of the functionality of the product that you're buying if you opt out of it. So that what she's saying is there's no meaningful way to opt out of data collection with these products. And that is a point that Kate Crawford makes with respect to the space of the city. So in the Crawford reading, and let's turn over to that now, what she's really talking about is the issue of how we're surveilled in real spaces, in real life. So you can think of products that we use online as subject to constant, it's really not just surveillance, it's collection, it's data collection. And you could look at that, I guess, and say, all right, well, you could not go online, although that's hard to imagine. But you at least, you have some way of opting out, right? So you could just live your life outside of digital spaces. And that would be a way to opt out of this data collection if you did not want to participate in that. But what about the spaces of our cities? We have an expectation of privacy when we go out on the street. We don't have the expectation that our movements are being tracked, for example, or that that high-tech surveillance techniques like facial recognition are being used. So if we're in a space that is being surveilled, there is a posted warning that says, warning, this area is subject to surveillance. And this, by entering that area, we give consent. And if you think about, there's a sort of history of having this right that you can't, for example, audio record people without their knowledge or consent, or you video record them or take photographs of them without getting consent. So Crawford actually starts out with a discussion of a case in Boston of the first year of the Boston Calling Festival. And this has gone on now since 2013, but this was the first example of it. And it was really right on the heels of the Boston Marathon bombing. It was like a month and a half after this. And the city contracted with private firms to sort of road test facial recognition technology at Boston Calling. So none of the people, for example, that you see in this press photo, which is taken from the stage of the crowd, and you can see this is in Copley Square downtown with the Boston City Hall right at the end of the shot there, are being told, there aren't posted signs that say, by entering this area, you are agreeing to be part of a pilot test in facial recognition technology. And it was actually an independent website that broke this story, and then the Globe followed it up, but they did not initially report this. So I'm posting the Globe story, but this was actually something that was dug up by people who worry about this kind of thing. Okay, so what this crowd is becoming here, right? And again, from the consumer point of view or from the individual point of view, what are you doing? You're going to a music festival. It's fun. You're with your friends. You're probably, getting rowdy and ingesting some substances. And that's your first personal experience of this. But actually what this is, an aspect of what it becomes is your behavior. And particularly your face becomes part of a testing protocol for surveillance technology. So by attending this, unknown to you, you are helping this company improve its surveillance technology. And there's no way to opt out of that because you don't know about it. You're not informed. So it was actually significantly after the fact that this story broke. And many people pointed out that it was probably the result of the Boston Marathon bombing that the city officials even thought that they could get away with something like this, or thought that this would that they could do this and then apologize if they got caught, was because there would be public buy-in for the idea of surveillance following the tragedy in Boston. But the thing that Crawford is really trying to point out is that this kind of data collection, this process whereby your individual behavior becomes a data point in a massive set, is particularly problematic when you start to connect it with real urban spaces. Because, as she points out in the last line of this paragraph here, these ideas about monitoring and controlling our behavior remain outside of traditional conceptions of participatory civic life and accountability. And what I think she means by that is that we have an idea of what a public space is that goes a long way back in history. So I'm showing you here the ruins of the Agora, the Athenian Agora, where it's right down the hill from the Parthenon is up on the hill here. This is a temple of Hephaestus. This is actually a modern church. And these are sort of the ruins of the old marketplace that was the Agora. So what do people imagine they're doing when they're going here? Well, they're buying the goods they need for daily life. They're running into people they know and are having conversations. In Athens, this was also where the courts were. So they're participating as members of juries on various civil and criminal matters. So there's kind of like an expectation of who you are in this space. And that is as a citizen, right? You're a participant in the public life. You're not someone who is being kept tabs on. You're not someone who is being monitored and controlled. You're someone who is sort of moving about of your own free will and doing the things that you want to do. And that conception is still the case in our modern cities, right? We don't think of ourselves as sort of either, I think, consumers primarily who are going to opt into one or another service on offer depending on what is being pushed at us, or as potential criminals who need to be surveilled to prevent tragic events, right? We think of ourselves as citizens, as participants. But in fact, and this is just a reconstruction of what the marketplace probably looked like. What is happening to us in the modern city is this is a case where simply by walking around, by going about our business, by doing whatever we're there to do, whether it's errands or shopping or mailing something or whatever our daily activities are, there's no way to opt out of being watched. And so rather than having sort of what we imagine to be like our free will to participate as we wish, we are in a state of sort of compulsory participation. And not only is that all of that behavior that's being watched and collected in the city, that's being sold to advertisers, and that allows them to say, oh, well, you're right near this Starbucks, so here's a coupon for $1 off a drink, right? So that's trying to change our footsteps and move our footsteps to go into the Starbucks and order that drink, right? So that's not exactly what we imagine as our choice, right? So there's that element, but there's also the element that that government agencies, so military agencies, but also civilian agencies like the police, are watching these data streams, and they're considering us as potential problems, right? Doing potentially criminal actions or terrorist actions, right? So we're actually being assessed as a threat to safety. And that, I think, in some ways is even more alarming to Crawford. And she uses the example, and you can look at these photos online, of British police in Kent creating this little artificial town that they started to use for tactical exercises, right? So this is a training ground for metropolitan police, for city police, to use the sort of city streets and the spaces of the city. And there's a whole little tiny artificial town here that this photographer has captured. In a sense, they're defending the city against us, right? So everyone who steps in the city is considered a potential source of a violent crime. And that's very, very different from the traditional notions of civic participation, right? So no one walking into the Athenian Agora is being thought of as likely a terrorist until their behavior proves otherwise. They're being considered as citizens and participants in the life of the city. So what Crawford is worrying about is the way that these sort of online data collection ideas have actually started to move off of exclusively digital forums and into the spaces of real life, like the city, such that these spaces are now incredibly wired with all kinds of surveillance technologies and sensors that are trying to collect data, and that data can be used for, a variety of purposes. It can be sold to advertisers. It can be used by law enforcement and other government agencies, and that is really kind of a further layer of the way that this is happening. That essentially who we are in the city is being redefined without our consent or knowledge. And that is what Crawford is particularly worried about in this excerpt. So for the assignment, I'm hoping that you'll think through these ideas and then consider how this all relates to the present crisis. So I've given you this editorial piece, which actually talks about sort of high-tech monitoring and control of COVID status as an important, contributor to public health and to the way we can restore our economies in the midst of this pandemic. So, as I said in the assignment prompt, there really is not a right answer to this, but I'm hoping you'll think through this very thorny issue as it just relates to BC and to coming back to campus. All right, so that is the assignment, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help.